And we're live. Welcome everybody to another Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, September 2nd. And I'll just copy and paste for anybody else that's just joining the HackMD docs. This is essentially our notes and our agenda. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees. And do you have any volunteers to help take notes today?
I can help.
No? Okay,
yep.
Thanks, Roy.
Yep.
Yeah, just a couple of housekeeping notes. I've been away for a couple of weeks, so appreciate the work by Roy and Isaac and everybody else for keeping these going while I was away. Quick acknowledgement of the code of conduct here. All the discussions, these calls and discussions in the RFC repo and all the repos in NPM are under a code of conduct that we ask that you abide by, and there's a link there if you'd like to read more. The gist of it is, be kind, please raise your hand when others are talking, and hopefully we'll have some good discourse. The idea behind these meetings is that we hope to push forward the discussion and hopefully the work around the NPM project, and this is an opportunity and a channel for folks to help give feedback and for us to have a discussion with the community about work they'd like to see us do and work they'd like to contribute. Did anybody have any announcements they wanted to share today?
Maybe the usual one about new beta release out.
Yeah, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Just make sure to try it out, the current version of the beta. It's npm install -g npm at next-7.
Yeah, so we've been, I think, publishing every Tuesday, but we also have publishes in between them. We may even have another one go out today. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. If you use the next-7, you'll get it if we push.
Yeah, correction there is next-7.
Dash, yeah, dash hyphen.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm never sure about the words, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, it's great. And yeah, so feel free to start using that and giving us feedback. We actually have a specific issue template which will label any bugs that you file for npm 7 specifically on the CLI repo. So that's a great way of giving us early feedback if you see that something's breaking or you're experiencing some sort of degradation from what you should be. We'd love to know early and often. And we're hoping to get more and more people using this as we're hoping to get generally available release out soon. So yeah, again, feel free to add yourselves to that HackMD doc. And if there's not any other announcements, we'll just dive right into the agenda. Starting with the RRFC, issue number 211, registry per package on same organization. This is, I think this is Arnaud. Arnaud, is that how you pronounce it? I think.
Hello guys, you hear me?
Yeah.
It's Berwan, Arnaud Luis from Paris. So I don't know if I can just talk about what we want to do that. So we have begun to make some publicity NPM package with my company, and we have some package hosted on NPM and some hosted on GitHub. For private package, we hosted on GitHub. But we want to use some NPM package with the organization scope and some referenced, some hosted package on the GitHub registry with the same scoped organization. So just in fact, I think we don't use two registry with the same scope for now. So it's just to use same scope with two different registry, but for some package, and for other we use another registry. I don't know if everyone understand what I said.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I read through the RRFC and this seems pretty reasonable. The only potentially tricky thing about it is that it is going to require that we kind of make very sure that we are setting that in all of the places where we select a registry. But I think that it's all pretty much going through one code path today. So it's just a matter of kind of updating that. If we see a full package name and it matches, then we use that one. Otherwise, if there's a scope that matches, we use that one.
Yeah, I've heard of this from other folks actually, that this was a use case. So
one potential alternative that we're likely to see, I expect that we'll see people request and has been brought up in the past, is a way to set the registry right in package.json for a given dependency. The challenge there is that it can make things a little bit complicated. But one of the things that it would allow us to do, so for example, if you publish something that has dependencies on multiple different packages that are on multiple different registries, those dependencies can't be fetched by anybody using it. The other hazard is making sure that you have listed all the things that need to be on the public registry. So, there's no way, and I'm not pushing back on this idea. I think this approach is simple and easy to implement, and I love it because it doesn't make my life too hard. But the shortcoming I expect, or maybe one of the issues I expect here, is that it does require listing out all of the public things sort of one at a time, and it doesn't have that additional capability of saying, well, this dependency of mine is from this alternative registry. I see that as more of a feature than a bug, though, because it keeps things a little bit simpler.
Interesting. So in the case that you were talking about before, where other people had wanted to define a specific dependency that would be downloaded from specific registry, what was like the design of that they were proposing inside of package.json? Like, how were they?
So usually it comes down to putting an object rather than a string as the value in your dependencies list. And then that object could say, version and registry. The pushback on it is usually like, well, that's not backwards compatible. It's more complicated, has potential to kind of split the ecosystem in weird ways.
Okay. So this seems like something that we actually want to include. Do we think we can turn this into an actual RFC?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, Arnaud, if you want to take the lead on writing that up, that's fine. Otherwise, one of us can get to it, or we can even just implement it and reference this discussion. I mean, it's not too controversial, in my opinion.
Cool. Did you want to take that away, Arnaud, or we can do it if you want? Lauren?
I can do a pull request. Is that
Yep.
With some information? Yes, I will do. I think perhaps tomorrow. Sorry, tomorrow if I have time, and I think I can't find time to do this.
Cool. Yeah, there's an issue template that you can follow along.
Yeah, I have seen it. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. Cool. So moving along, if there's no other discussion there, to issue 192, the RFC for new subcommand npm clone. And do we have Meta here on the call?
I think they mentioned they would be following from YouTube. Was it?
Okay.
Them?
So I'm not sure if anybody's had a chance to look at this. Isaac, you were the last to, I guess, or actually, sorry, Roy, you were the last to note this. I'm not sure if there was some discussion last week on this.
Yeah, sorry, which one you're talking about? The NPM clone?
Yeah, NPM clone 192, issue 192.
Yeah, I think Isaac did had a follow-up with that one, had some comments in the issue.
Yeah. So I did post some comments in the issue. I see Meta replied back. So the hardest thing about this, honestly, is just the bike shed on what the options look like. But I think that's entirely resolvable. So we'll probably just do a little bit of, once we kind of have that nailed down, then writing a spec for it should be easy. Again, this is relatively uncontroversial. The tricky part is what the, whether or not we install dependencies when you clone one of the, like when you clone a registry.
Like, is it clone and install module type thing? Yeah.
Right. One possibility is we say npm clone does not install, and that's just how it is. And then we add another command like clone install that will clone it to a folder and then cd in there and npm install it.
Like maybe
we have like install and test, right? Like I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that, but yeah.
Maybe just a quick summary of the idea.
Sure. Roy, do you have good grasp of it, or Isaac?
Yeah. So quick summary. There's a package on the registry that lists a Git repository. So I want to clone that Git repository into a folder without having to, do git clone $, open paren, npm repo, module name, close paren, module name. And so npm clone would effectively just do that, and then potentially also run a command in the folder. So one possibility to do install is we could just say like, npm clone express -c npm install, right? That would be like one way to cd into that folder and npm install it. But otherwise, yeah, it's something I actually have a shortcut in my bash RC to do exactly this. I find myself doing it so frequently.
Right. I think one question I will have though, like if we do have that, let's say we do have npm clone, what is maybe we also want to support like something similar to Pacote extract, right? To do the same thing, but from the published tarball from the registry. So maybe have a npm clone with an option for just fetching from the registry instead of cloning the Git repo. Does that even sound useful to anyone?
Are you talking about fetching the tarball
and placing it to a folder in your file system?
Because my guess is that this is going to the source, right? Like the source, cloning the source repo.
Yeah,
right. It's cloning whatever the repository is in the package manifest.
Right, which I think is probably the most, like, I see myself using that. I see myself like, yeah, I don't see myself wanting to extract the tarball. Yeah, I don't see a use case when I would want that, Roy.
I do it all the time, but I'm not, it's true that it's not for regular usage.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, what do you do with that then? Like, what are you doing with the Git?
Then you can inspect contents, right? Like you can inspect contents of a package without necessarily running an npm install and running into, you can imagine like
Pacote has a CLI now.
I know. But I mean, we have git clone. We can also argue that because this feels like a very much a developer experience kind of thing, right?
So are you saying that as well as having, let's say, a name, a package name, you could have, I guess, a package name and then some sort of flag? Like what flag would you provide?
Roy, when you want to check package contents without installing it, you don't just go to unpackage?
No, never think of that.
No,
All right, sorry, is your connection bad, Jordan? I think you're dropping out of the call.
No, unpackage is cool, but I have to open a web browser. I can't like grep it.
You don't have a web browser open at all times?
I'm not looking at it at all times. If I'm in my client, I use Picoche.
Sorry, I see Killian and Christian have their hands up. Killian, would you like to go first, and then Christian? Sorry if it was the other way around.
Yeah, so a lot of packages just don't have much in the actual upload to NPM. I mean, if the package is smartly with the files field and all, you will get the files, sure, but I mean, most of what's actually making the package won't be there anyways. So checking out an actual repository will give you way more. That's an issue. Well, I don't have an issue with it. It's just like limited usefulness.
Christian, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. What if you have a mono repository, or not really that is an issue, but especially if you're looking for a specific version, which is probably something you want to do with NPM. So I know this is probably kind of hard, right, to be able to clone a specific version, but I could see that might be useful. I don't know, or maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a pretty good idea. So if it to address both your points, the first one, if it's a mono repo and it specifies a directory in the repository, we can sort of handle that. There's an open question as to whether we would want to only clone that one folder, which I know there's some ways to do in Git, or if we would just use that folder as kind of the thing we CD into if you pass a command line argument. The other question as to like cloning a particular version, for that we actually could get a little clever and look for, let you pass like a tag or a branch name that you want to do, or even if you give us a version and the package manifest has a Git head, we could even check out that specific Git commit.
So Jordan's made a comment in a side channel here. NPM unpack would be interesting.
That was like for Roy's feature request.
I know that's that's what I'm saying. Like Roy, if you really want that, it sounds like that's a perfect name for that. I think clone makes a lot of sense if it's strictly for
Git, yeah.
Right. But as for the clone thing, I think it'll be incredibly tricky because tag name conventions, the most common is a V and then the version number. The next most common is just the version number. And the next most common in monorepos is the monorepo subpackage name and @ and then the version number. But there's also like a bajillion other conventions.
Yeah,
so
release space, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So how to guess those is like, I mean, you could support someone passing an explicit tag name, but like, I just don't think there's any really viable, what's it called? Like viable heuristic that you could apply there.
Yeah. So the thing we would have to do is, the same sort of like semver matching and just look for a semver range, like what we do for semver tag matching for Git dependencies, which is not perfect, but it does work in a surprisingly large number of cases for most of those kind of common patterns. It doesn't work well for monorepos. But I think there's still a handful of bike sheds to kind of sort out on this one, but I don't think any of them are particularly challenging. They all kind of just come down to the UX. Like the basic idea of like, there should be an easy way to clone something that lists its repo, like I would use that all the time. Like that is something obvious and good that we should have.
Yeah. So maybe we can ask for either Meta or one of us to make the actual RFC, because I think that like we can actually do any bike shedding in the PR itself. I think like this is something we want, right? So, or I would use this like day one. I just know that already. So yeah, okay. Any other feedback on this? Go ahead.
I know Meta was sending some messages in the YouTube chat, which we often forget to check. So yeah, so basically the same main idea is to make contributing to packets more straightforward. Yeah. But yeah, then he says, "Oh, realize you were not reading this, so sorry about it."
I'll have to keep my eye on that going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if we can take an action item to follow up and make sure that this actually gets turned into a proper RFC, then we can flush out any other details around it.
Yeah, maybe Meta can reply in the chat there if they want to just follow up, or if they just prefer us to take care of it.
I'll tentatively wait here. There might be a delay as well. There we go. Okay. Sounds like they'll try to flush it out. That sounds good. Cool. So moving on then to issue number 191, adding a registry identifier to the publish prompt. So this again is issue brought up by Meta. It's closed. I'm not sure if you just want to note sort of the next steps here, Roy. You closed it and we accepted essentially a publish prompt.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow up with the note keeping. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Which one is it?
So basically, I think that you added this as an agenda item just to note that we closed the issue 191, add registry identifier to publish prompt.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you referenced essentially the RFC for the publish confirmation prompt, which I know you had put together.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
is this just an addition that was added to this RFC?
Yeah, or maybe just forgot an item for the last meeting. But anyways, it's a good reminder. We ended up amending the previous RFC to just add that registry note there. So thanks, Meta, for the contribution.
Not much to say.
Cool. Moving on, then PR 146. So the notification system for CLI updates. This was brought by you, Roy. If you want to speak to it, I can actually take notes while you're speaking to it.
Yeah, cool. So I put that back home just to mainly so that we can just give a heads up to the community, because we ended up landing a new notification system for the CLI, right? In order to unblock us for the beta. We had some problems with update notifier. So we ended up replacing it in the CLI already. But the RFC still does have a bunch of cool ideas that we want to implement. So I guess the action item here is to update the RFC and remove the references to update notifier and just like the UX of the thing itself. And now it's going to be more focused on the header idea that Isaac had before. So maybe Isaac, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so just to review, because it's been a while since we talked about this, very quick review. The idea is that we would, on the registry side, we would, if we detect, the NPM, PNPM, and Yarn, and pretty much all CLIs that talk to the registry send a user agent header that tells us exactly what version of the CLI that they're using. The idea would be on the registry itself, we would look at like what is the version and which CLI are you using, and then send a specific header, a well-known header that would say, you know, latest version is blah. And then those CLIs could decide whether they want to take that info and, you know, print out a notice telling the user what to do, or just, you know, ignore it and throw it away, like whatever. It's up to them if they want to show that every day, every time, only once per week. Like, it's entirely up to them. But that would save sort of an extra round trip to the registry for that's otherwise unnecessary. And actually, it's downloading the full package of whatever CLI they're using. So it's not a small request. It's not huge, but it's, you know, it's not nothing. So yeah, I still think we should do that. It's almost entirely registry work, so it's probably going to sit and kind of come in priority wise behind a bunch of other more important things for, you know, stability and scaling and better features and such. But yeah, we can leave the RFC open as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, and we can take it out of the, well, I'll do it right now. Take it off the agenda. It was just to give the heads up.
Yep.
That's pretty nice. I guess we've had this open for a while as well.
Yep.
I didn't realize how long. Cool. So moving on then to RFC number 210, peer-specific overrides. I think, Killian, you had proposed this. I was away last week, and I think there was some discussion already on this by, I think, Isaac and Roy. Is that right?
And Killian, yeah. Killian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe where we landed was we're going to do regular overrides as spec'd rather than this, because overrides are going to come relatively soon.
Yeah, probably. It's just like last time I had barely any time to prepare, so I was a little hazy around everything. I also pulled an all-nighter on another project. So there are a couple of things I would really like to talk about that I forgot last time. I just added the link to the what's it called? RFC? The RFC, the main file.
Sure.
Where I added a section just under the table of content where I have the points written down. One thing, right now, there are optional peers. Like, what's the plan of this? Is this now something that's definitely going to be in there, and why? Why was this chosen?
So why were optional peers chosen? That's a great question. This is something that that Yarn added and then PNPM added. The idea being that it is a peer dependency that is not installed if you do no optional. So it's essentially the same as an optional dependency, but its resolution target starts at the parent of the dependent rather than inside the dependent.
Well, more conceptually, it's that it's a peer dependency that doesn't have to exist for the program to work correctly, whereas a regular peer dependency does have to exist for it to work correctly, conceptually.
Right, exactly. So again, just like an optional dependency that has to be a peer. Another way to, it's the overlap of those two, circles in the Venn diagram. In terms of like how this impacts like module resolution and how we sort of build out the dependency tree, a peer optional dependency, if we can't place it anywhere, or if it's if it can't be fetched, just like an optional dependency, it will not be treated as a like a critical failure that we crash the install for. That's kind of the main difference. And so if there's any errors installing it, if the engine, I believe if the engines or platform don't match as well, we skip optional deps if we can't find an engine match. And if, or if its build scripts fail, we just kind of clean it up and move on.
Okay, so yeah, if that's common in the other installers, then it's not a big deal. I was just wondering about like people just opting to make them optionals because it's a bit easier, in quotes. But if it's
some of
common
the
in other
history,
ones, that's, yeah.
some of the history, I believe, or motivation for doing that in the first place was that there were some small but vocal parts of the ecosystem that were under the mistaken impression that peer dependencies were optional and had been using them in that way. And when they then ran headlong into the fact that 99% of the ecosystem treats them as required, they wanted a way to still do what they wanted to do without having people yell at them and make them feel bad. And then they advocated for this feature. And since, I mean, it has a real use case, I'm not trying to marginalize the use case, just kind of, that's my understanding of how the feature came to be.
It's a reasonable telling of the story. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of features come to be.
I get it. I mean, I also thought at the beginning that peer dependencies were optional, just before I learned otherwise.
Because they're not installed by default, like that sort of de facto behavior in NPM and Yarn and PNPM is what made them be essentially treated as an optional dependency. Although, you know, and then that's kind of got annoyed that like they got bug reports because these dependencies weren't there or they couldn't install them, and yeah.
And to be fair, peer dependencies are confusing, so nobody should ever feel bad for misunderstanding them, ever.
Then another point, last time we talked about like the Semver check and peer dependencies, whether or not or how it should react for pre-releases. Like last time, I think we came to the conclusion that pre-releases should be accepted in general in peer dependencies, so only in peers, not in norms, of course. But that could cause a few problems. Like, yeah,
I could.
Maybe like some packages can handle a peer dependence pre-release and others can't. That's like the point that now you have the peer dependency de facto be that experimental for all of the packages.
Yeah, I think
I already use pre-releases in peer dependencies. Like Enzyme has an adapter that depends on the React 16 pre-release, and soon we'll probably have one for the React 17 pre-release. But it does that explicitly with like a caret, 16.0.0.0-0.
Yeah, sure.
Thing. So are you suggesting that there's something that would automatically include them?
Yeah, we had talked about loosening the peer dependency requirement, so it would accept potentially accept a pre-release if there's one there already that would otherwise match its Semver range. I'm kind of with you, Killian. I thinking about that more, I don't know if it's a great idea. We were sort of spitballing some ideas of how to get past a lot of the mess that's built up over the years of peer dependencies not being installed by default and not being sort of required to be in a valid state by default. I think that we've landed on some better approaches in Arborist and the CLI that don't require that. So I'm happy to walk back that suggestion I made last time and pretend I didn't say it. It was a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, in the first I thought it was right too, but thinking about it, same as you. Then what do we have? Like on how your overrides RFC on its workings.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you specify an override, here I have the example, like in the link I sent you. What if like you do you have the link open?
I don't.
Because I am just telling you nobody will get it. But so basically we have a root has a dependency on package A. Package A requests a peer of B. Package A also has a dependency on C. C requests a peer of B. So if you specify an override for the peer A requests, like does C still get the original B, or will it get the override?
Okay, so root has a dep on A has a peer of B and a dep on C, and C has a peer of B. B is overridden with X by
root towards A. Yeah.
So anything under that on that branch of the dep graph, of the dependency graph, would get the overridden version. So, I mean, the overrides are very powerful, and you can absolutely break your package by doing this. So in that case, yes, C would get the overridden version, the X version in this example, because we're overriding it from the from the root, right? So it's everything that matches C will instead be replaced with X, and all the deps on C will get X instead. The more common use case here would be situations where I depend on React 16.13 or whatever, and I have something in my tree that has a pure dependency on React 16.8. This is a real life case, like buried in the guts of Gatsby. And so everybody using Gatsby installing with npm 7, our latest beta release, it just doesn't install right? They get this incomprehensible error. The next beta release will make it somewhat more comprehensible, and will also allow them to get past this by specifying force, to say, I know that there's a pure conflict, but there's something else like higher up in the tree that has a direct dependency on this version of React. So just too bad, buddy. Like, you're going to get the new version of React. With an override, you could be more precise. So you would not have to say force and force everything. You could say just this one thing, like just basically force the overrides for anything depending on React, because I know that I want to use version 16.13. whatever.
So just quickly,
what if?
I know that John's hands up. I think he had a note previously about the pre-releases, but I'm not sure if you also want to.
No, this is new.
Okay, cool.
It was just a quick question. Like, can we make sure that there's a simple way that I can say, hey, person filing an issue on my package, what's the output of this command? And then it will tell me what their overrides are so that I can tell them I don't support that.
Yeah, I think like listing out your overrides is probably pretty reasonable. We also do need to, at some point, relatively soon, I think, need to kind of take a fresh design pass over the output of npm ls, because the way that it prints things out doesn't really clarify whether something is a peer dependency, a dev dependency, whether it's been overridden, whether it's in conflict, but we're accepting it because you used force, and all these kind of subtle edge cases.
One more point, like the scenario from before. If we go like one tree root deeper and a sub package has a different override, like unrelated to, well, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you can only specify overrides at the root package level, but you can specify them in a nested way. So I can say, in my project, I can say any dependency on C that comes from within the A portion of the tree needs to be overridden, but other dependencies on C, I'll leave them as they are.
Like only in the root. So if somebody uses stub package as a dependency, will the override still be applied?
No, it's only
that sounds like an issue.
Project level thing.
Could we also add a warning to npm publish if you try to publish a package that has overrides?
Sure, I get to that. I have a point on that, but for that, like, that sounds like an issue because it makes the package basically unshareable.
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily, overrides are primarily a kind of app level feature, is the intent. But yeah, if there are cases where, for example, like let's say in this case with Gatsby, for example, the dependency in question, I mean, Gatsby controls it. So it's managed by the same team. They can totally fix the issue on their end. I have an open PR to help them fix the issue on their end. and it's not that hard to get that resolved. But if it was a case where, you know, Gatsby is using some dependency they don't control, and that dependency has a peer dependency on a incompatible version of React, or a, you know, unnecessarily strict Semver range on React, but actually does work fine with the latest and greatest React 16, then the, you know, basically Gatsby would work fine if you have this override, and it won't work if you don't, unless you specify -- force or you add the override yourself in your app. So yeah, so that is kind of an open question, right? On the one hand, I don't necessarily want, you know, the author of one of my dependencies to have that much kind of control over everything in the tree outside of the package that I'm actually installing. On the other hand, it may render their module effectively, you know, dead in the water because it doesn't work unless I know to put this override in place.
Yeah, I think that's a real problem. Like, I do have, what version did I use? Like, if you go to the point, detailed explanation, logic, and examples, basically, I have the way I used it was that overrides kind of trickle down the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And if a subpackage defines a different override or has the original one as a dependency, that or the first override from the root will get like disabled at that point only. It would make the tree resolution less efficient, of course, but it would allow for somebody else to use a package that has an override somewhere in the tree.
It unfortunately also reduces the power that the app author has to control kind of what they want to control with overrides. So, for example, one of the I don't know if Wes appears to not be on the call. Wes had a bunch of real world cases for overrides coming out of Netflix and some of the stuff that they're doing in production. But one of the main use cases was there's a, you know, either a security vulnerability or a bug or just some kind of bad thing with a published module that they're using. And so what they want to, you know, they have a fix, they have a patched version, and what they want to do is say anybody who's using, you know, version 2.3.4 of foobar, like if it would resolve to that anywhere in the tree, we want to use our patched version instead that fixes this security or other bug. And
sure,
so if something in the dependency graph has an override on that thing, they don't want to respect it. Like they want to say, no, like I know what I'm doing and I want you to use this override instead. So it's more similar to Yarn resolutions where like the root package basically always takes priority.
Sure, but that's too, like the root has priority. It's like that's a somewhat direct dependency. So it would inherit the override, the root specified. That's the plan here. It's like
right.
more
So
if somebody was using that package now, like the package that specified the override, that no matter who the user of that package, what overrides like he specifies on his level, they wouldn't get past that other override. The original override from that dependency would still be in effect. So to say, well, that's exactly for that reason.
That's what I'm saying. So in this case, the app specifies an override at the top level, and they do not want anything else to be able to override.
Yeah, that's the point. Like, but if we don't have an app but a package, same case, the package doesn't want his dependency to be overridden in any way. So that exactly inheritance, that override, that package specified would take priority. The new root, the one who uses that package, couldn't overwrite that with the peer system I have here.
So
right, but that's kind of an issue that's not how we want it to work, though. Right, like
so I think this is a differing of opinions, right? Like for how we want this. Yeah.
That's also why I made that a separate point: the peer overrides versus the normal overrides. It's like, I don't think they're necessarily competing. They are for different use cases, in my opinion.
Okay. I just want to be mindful of time because we only have about 12 minutes left, and I want to make sure that like we get to the last two items.
Just
is it possible?
Want to point, like good error messages. I have a section on that can be read just because I don't know his name. He want to talk with errors and stuff. I have a small section on that. That's all. Okay.
Yeah, the error message and warning. I see it's another note that you added here on that. So, yeah, I appreciate like you put a lot of work into this. So, I mean, I think if anybody gets some time after the call, like we should definitely I'm going to read through this properly because I haven't had time to do that. I think ideally, if you know what's come out of this is maybe, and to Jordan's point, a published prompt might be good, especially for the existing override spec that we sort of have already agreed we want to move forward with. Something like that might help with ensuring that people understand how that override spec is going to work, and the fact that it's not going to override or supersede the root or application or project level or override would probably be good for us to implement something like that. So we may want to update the spec or the RFC in overrides to add some line about how we're actually going to implement that so that we avoid that kind of edge for folks. So they don't have the assumption that this that you can publish a package with overrides specified that are going to be essentially in like accepted. So that might be something we want to take away and add to that RFC. And then it sounds like there's some more discussion we can have on your specific PR there, Killian. I'll definitely take a look and add some notes myself after this call, if that's okay.
That's fine. I'll still be up for a few hours at least, so I'm available.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So if we can move on to the next item, PR 209, provide download counts by versions. I'm not sure if this was talked about in the last RFC.
No, not sure. I don't think we got to it last time.
Is Jingming on?
No, I think they mentioned they wouldn't be able to attend.
Okay. I'm not sure if anybody's had any time to look at this then. Maybe we should just move on if they were not able to speak to it. This is something, at least it's definitely like a registry feature that we've talked about many times. We know that this is a capability that people want in order to have that granular understanding of download counts per version. So this is something that I think is in the works and has been for a while. But I'm speaking to that very anecdotally. Okay, let's give some time then for the very last item, which is PR 195, the RFC for check engine requirements on each install. I know, Jordan, you've been involved in this discussion, and Isaac as well, mentioning things like engine strict, etc. I'm not sure if anybody can, or if Mark's actually on the call. If not, maybe, I'm not sure, Jordan or somebody else with a little bit more context can weigh in on this.
I mean, it kind of seems like the RFC is essentially that they want engine strict to be the default again. And my participation is in the issue is that I think that should never be the default. I definitely think that, like, I made a package called ls-engines that checks that for your dep graph. And like, I would love to see that be a first class command in NPM. And I would love to see NPM do that check, like when people opt into it, and perhaps even do the check and show the output without failing the install on install. But I think it's pretty critical that personally that mismatched engines do not fail the install, because, you know, those things are often missing, often wrong, and it's, you know, it would generate a ton of noise if I had to, like, if my two options are either, as a package author, are either to have my engine support just be star or greater than or equal to, like, that's one option, which avoids the noise, but means people are going to complain that things are broken. The other option is that I make them be correct, but then the instant a new version comes out, even if it already works, I then have a bunch of noise where I have to update my package to support the engine. So, like, that's what I would think I'd like to avoid. And I think that making engine strict by default would cause that.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm fully in support of surfacing that information. Go ahead.
The problem with the problem with engine strict, and the reason why it's not the default is that people tend to be package authors, not all package authors, but a significant portion of package authors tend to be way overly strict in terms of the requirements that they put in their package JSON as to which node version they support. There's some reasonable, like, justification for this, right? Like, if I haven't tested my code on node 14 and then node 14 comes out, or node 15 comes out, or whatever, and then I get a bunch of people complaining at me, I want to be able to say, like, look, I never promised that this would work there. I tested on node 12 and it worked fine, and you're using it on 15 and it doesn't, like, leave me alone. The hazard there is, like, it probably does work fine on node 15. And so if we crash or we refuse to install it, now a bunch of apps just won't work on node 15, and that sucks for Node, right? Now Node is getting all of these errors saying, like, well, everything breaks. So we ran into this when, like, a long time ago with node versions being updated and apps breaking as a result, and made the decision to make engine strict not the default. And since then, I think life's been mostly pretty good. So the functional thing, like, the thing that's actually worth kind of talking about in this RFC, like, we're not going to make engine strict the default. That's too disruptive, just given the priorities of NPM and how we want to work within kind of the node ecosystem. But the thing that is a suggestion in this RFC we're talking about is, so I do an installation with let's say node 14, and it chooses the best match for all of my deps, and it builds out this dependency tree, and it saves it in my package lock JSON. Then later on node 12, I have this package lock JSON and I run npm install. Now, if there's a package lock, we don't rebuild the ideal tree. We just look at what's in the package lock and say, all right, like, you decided already in the past what the ideal tree should be, so I'm going to make it that, because that's what's in the package lock. And so I'm going to look at what's in the actual tree. If that's empty, then, you know, I'll just dump everything in there that the package lock says and not even think about it. So the suggestion in this RFC is to essentially reevaluate for engine strictness anything that's in the package lock file that would not otherwise be getting evaluated. And there's two ways that we can go with that. So first of all, that's adding work to the install. It's not something we should probably do by default as a result of that. Second, we can add that. So we can either make that a separate flag. So when you're installing, like, you know, do this deep engine checking, or we can make it something that npm ls does, where it will, like, highlight those problems as it's reading your package tree and say, oh, look, this thing says it has an engine requirement on foo, you have bar, so there's a problem. The other thing, which is where it starts to get into kind of dangerous territory, we use the engines, even when we're not in engine strict mode, we still do use the engine declaration as a heuristic to decide which version of a dependency to pull in. So if your dependency range says, you know, I support version 1 or 2, and 2 has an engine requirement of, you know, node greater than or equal to 14, and 1 has an engine requirement of node greater than or equal to 6, and you're on node 12, it'll pick version 1 because that's the one that doesn't cause an engine problem. so if we were to go back and sort of reevaluate the dependency resolutions for everything that has an engine conflict, now essentially, even though you have a package lock, we're installing something different than what's in the package lock file. And that's where it starts to get into like really dangerous, like non-deterministic kind of cases which I'm not entirely comfortable with. So that sort of second, more advanced, like rebuild the package tree. Like if you want to do that, you run npm update explicitly.
Well, what if you don't want to run it? Like if you have a compiled package and you change node versions, you have to run npm rebuild in order to get the right thing. What if you had to run that command or something spelled differently to regenerate the same package lock, but with, like, instead of just npm update, because you don't want later versions of things, you just want to reconfigure your package lock for the new engine explicitly, right? Like, would that be possible?
Essentially, it would be like get a list, you know, the logic there, the pseudocode, whatever, would be like get a list of all the things that have an invalid engine in them and run npm update in your current context just for those versions. Right. So that's something that we could potentially add as a flag or an option. You know, npm update -- only the bad ones.
But I think the problem is that we're not storing the engines that you're running against. Like the non-deterministic aspect there is that we're not storing, let's say,
like what engine
of npm and version of node in the log file, right? Like, so that then truly you could regenerate it just fine if you were storing that information, right? Like, is that?
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to storing, you know, stashing the engines that we used to generate a lock file in the lock file itself. I don't know that it solves this problem per se, because if we're making any change to the package tree, you got to think like that could completely change what resolutions we have. And changing one thing is the same as potentially changing everything, right? Like, because they might have different depths, it might cascade and so on. So I think like essentially it does come down to like doing a full update but limited to just starting with reevaluating the package nodes that are the dependency nodes that have an invalid engine.
Invalid to
what you're currently running.
Right. Which could change, right? Like between devs.
Right. And so you'd have to run run some specific command. The use case here is there's a CI process that's running, and it's pulling in things that have an engine mismatch because they're running their CI on multiple node versions with the same package lock file. And so, I mean, my thinking on this, like the way I would approach it is like, well, if you need to support node 12, you need to be running with node 12 and installing and building the lock file with node 12, and then your CI will install what's in the lock file and test it on node 12. And if it doesn't break on 12 and it doesn't break on 14, even though the engines are, you know, allegedly broken, like, okay, cool, then it works.
So it sounds like we need to give some feedback to narrow in on what we could actually look at, the problem we could actually look at trying to help solve, versus what we know we're not going to support. So, okay. So it sounds like we can add a couple comments to that thread then. I appreciate, Ari, the discussion that's been had there. Apologize, we're a couple of minutes over. Feel free to, again, bubble up any issues or PRs that we might have missed on this call, and definitely keep having conversations in the actual issues and PRs themselves. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining again, and we'll be in the same time and same place next week. And yeah, I'll talk to you all soon. Ciao.
See you next week.
Bye.
Yep.